Today is a dark day for Scotland. Humza Yousaf and the SNP have succeeded in their attempt to curtail the rights of 6 million people in Scotland. Freedom of speech in Scotland is officially dead. It was already compromised with previous hate speech laws we had, and that was enough. But now it is actually dead. Freedom of speech no longer exists. We, as a nation, can no longer claim to have the right to freedom of speech. We are now perhaps one of the most authoritarian countries in the West. We are certainly the most authoritarian part of the UK. And I am disgusted. I made 2 videos previously. This man is trying to end free speech in Scotland. This was back in August. Then I made another one in December. This law will end free speech in Scotland. And in these videos I was warning and talking about this hate crime bill being sponsored by Humza Yousaf. He's the Cabinet Secretary for Justice of Scotland since 2018. And just yesterday, this hate crime bill passed. Yes, 82, no, 32 abstain, 4. And before we go into more specifics of this in details, the thing that actually amuses me and amazes me most here is that the people voting against it were the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party were the only party who actually banded together and voted against this thing. Don't you think it's quite amusing, a bit strange, a bit ironic almost, that for a long time, the Conservative Party were always looked at as the party of kind of being backwards, back and traditional, about not protecting people's rights. The party that wanted to curtail everyone's rights. And it was always seen that the left wing and that the word progressive, and they were the people who wanted to make sure that everyone had rights and make sure that everyone kept their freedoms. Well, it seems like the roles have almost reversed here, and that shocks me. I mean, I've never voted for the Conservative Party in Scotland, and I don't know if I ever will. But I am amazed that they are the only ones who seem to be all for protecting our basic freedom to speech. And now, obviously, this doesn't really mean much. You're not seeing much on the screen right now. I've spoken about the details of this bill in previous videos, and I'm going to get into a little bit of that in a minute. It just says the Hate Crime and Public Order Bill has passed. So, to you, that might just sound like, oh, well, hate crime's illegal now. Hooray. And sure, that is a great thing, that hate crime's illegal, but hate crime was already illegal. It was already bad to do certain things. Beating someone up in the street was already illegal. Harassing someone was already illegal. What this bill has largely done, it has made it an offence to be offensive when your offensive comments are targeted at any sort of group of people. And you might be thinking, okay, well, maybe this is only going to affect racists or bad people. But it's not that simple. Here is an extract of this bill. Part 2, offences related to stirring up hatred. Now bear in mind that violating this new law can cost you up to 7 years in prison. Now as a comparison, the maximum sentence for being caught with indecent images of minors, CP, that is a maximum sentence of 10 years. So we're talking pretty similar timeframes here for violating this law versus actually being some sort of horrible person with these indecent images. Now, if we look down here, to introduce new offences relating to stirring up hatred. These comprise the offences of stirring up hatred under sections 3, 1 and 2 of the bill, and also the offences of possessing inflammatory material under section 5. Now, if you're not aware of what this actually means, because I'm not going to go through this entire bill, I don't want to spend that long on this, you can do some looking yourself. If I remember, I'll link to this document in the description down below. Basically, this law makes it illegal to possess inflammatory materials. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to possess inflammatory materials? Well, it's a very vague thing to say, but anything that could be considered offensive towards a specific group, towards someone based on their race, religion, any of these types of categories. And what this means is that technically now in Scotland, it is illegal to have an offensive meme on your mobile device. If you have a meme on your phone that makes some sort of edgy joke relating to religion or race or whatever it is, or gay people, you are now breaking the law. You could go to prison for 7 years for having a meme on your phone or on your computer. That is ridiculous. There have been some arguments that perhaps even carrying a Bible could be classed as inflammatory materials and you're possessing it. Because in the Bible, there are lots of remarks made about women being second class, essentially, about how they should obey their husbands, about how it's wrong to be gay. So suddenly, you could technically argue under this bill that carrying a Bible means you are now violating the law because you are in possession of inflammatory materials. Carrying a Quran, same thing. These are religious texts that speak against things such as homosexuality. These can be deemed offensive and because of that punishable under law. 7 years in prison. Now, will the bill be enacted that way? Will the law be used that way? It is unlikely. But that doesn't mean that the possibility isn't still there. Folks, this bill would make it illegal, not even just in public. This isn't even just about things you say in public. This is also making certain speech illegal at home. It's all about stirring up hatred and what constitutes as hatred and what constitutes stirring up hatred. And there has been great concern that this bill could make it illegal to share controversial opinions, even in regards to politics, simply because other people could judge them as stirring up hatred. How many times have you been on social media and you've seen someone express a controversial opinion, let's say, and that opinion might not be that controversial to you. Maybe it's just a general right-wing opinion, let's say. A general right-wing opinion about, say, immigration. And you think, okay, let's limit immigration. Now, I'm not saying I'm for or against that. I'm keeping my own opinions out of it here. But say you've got some random right-wing person who says, I want to curtail immigration because I think it's bad for the economy. Okay? Now you might have someone come out and say, well, I think you are stirring up hatred against immigrants by saying you think that they could be any way bad for our economy. Suddenly now, that means that it is illegal to voice the opinion that you think immigration should be curtailed. Suddenly, because that is now counting as stirring up hatred. It's not just about saying offensive things, folks. It's also about voicing opinions and saying things that could be perceived as being hateful or perceived as stirring up hatred. That may not have even been your intent there, but it's stirring up hatred, so you must be punished for that. This bill makes it illegal to say these kind of things in your own home. The Scottish Government want you to report your friends and family members at the dinner table if they say something you deem to be stirring up hatred, something you deem to be hateful. This is madness. This is utter madness. For people to report their friends and their family members for expressing controversial, hateful opinions, with the idea that this person will now perhaps go to jail for 7 years for voicing such opinion. What a dreadful, disgusting stain on the human race this bill is. This is an egregious violation of human rights, and I've never been more ashamed of my country, more ashamed of my government for allowing such a thing to pass. The curtailing of freedom of speech and human rights. Over here on Twitter, we see Humza defending the bill, delighted that the hate crime bill has passed and supported by every party in Parliament except Tories. Bill provides protection for those who are targets of hate crime while protecting freedom of speech, from racism to homophobia and everything in between. There is no room for hate. Now, I'm going to say it straight up here. It's not nice to hate people. It's not nice to say hateful and hurtful things. If someone is attacking someone, like physically committing a crime against someone, that is already illegal. If someone is committing a crime, like they are committing assault or murder, that's already illegal, okay? We don't need more laws for that. Okay, you want to make it a bit more specific and say, okay, now there is hate crime laws in place to specify this, so, this murder was actually fueled from hate, so there's maybe a different sentencing for that. Okay, you go ahead. But what this bill is doing, it's making it a hate crime to say offensive things. Hate crime is no longer just going out and beating some gay man up because you don't like gays. Previously, that's what you'd have thought of as a hate crime. because you're targeting some gay man walking down the street and you beat him up because he's gay. And that's disgusting. That person he deserves to go to jail. But now you're talking about putting people in prison for saying things that you deem to be hateful, for saying things that you deem to be offensive. Under this law, if you went to Twitter and tweeted at a gay man using the F slur, you could go to prison for 7 years. Now, is the person who tweeted that thing a piece of shit? Is that person a horrible person? Should we be friends with that? No, we shouldn't be friends with that. That's a bad person. They're not very nice, okay? I think we can all agree on that. But I think it takes a really ridiculous thought process to jump from, that's a bad, horrible person, I don't really want to associate with them, to suddenly jump to, we need to put that person in prison for 7 years for saying that. That is what this law is. That is what this bill is. This bill will also make it that certain jokes won't even be legal. We've already had some problems with this in Scotland, but this is going to make it even worse. You could make a joke about whether it's a gay thing, a religion thing, a race thing, and maybe you think you shouldn't joke about those things in the first place, and that's your prerogative. And I'm not even giving an opinion. I'm just saying that's how it'll be. You will not be able to joke in it. Think of all the comedians out there. Suddenly they've actually said things that could land them in prison for making these jokes. You could argue, well, that joke's stirring up hatred. That's offensive. That's a hate crime. That is what this bill has done. And I've used this example in all these videos I've made, and I'm going to go back to it again, and it's the Count Dankula situation. And this happened before this bill. Count Dankula was found guilty. Had years and years of his life put on trial in the public eye. All because he made a joke video on YouTube, where he made some Nazi jokes. Where, as a joke, he taught his girlfriend's pug to do a Nazi salute in response to certain words. And sure, you can find that video grossly offensive. That's your right, and you can think he's bad for doing that. That's your right. But to think the man should go to prison for making that joke video? I cannot stand behind that thought process. I think that is an egregious thought process. I think it's horrible. You can't put people in prison for making jokes or statements, no matter how disgusting you find them to be. Especially jokes. And that's where we get to another post here. And this is Count Dankula responding to Humza Yousaf. So here Humza said, threshold of stirring up fences is very high. Behaviour has to be considered by a reasonable person to be threatening or abusive and intended to stir up hatred. A reasonable defence exists. Freedom of expression clause gives further safeguards. And Count Dankula responds saying, this part is complete lies. The reasonable man test can be disregarded in Scottish courts. And do you know why? Because it wasn't his. Intention does not have to be proven. In fact, it can be disregarded, as it was in my case. Reasonableness defence does not exist, not even defined in the bill. And don't take my word for this, don't take his word for this. Go read the bill yourself, folks. I will link to it in the description down below. Humza Yousaf is on here saying, oh, well, we need to prove intent, we need to do this and that. That's not true historically. Before this bill was even pushed into law, which has made things even more strict, Count Dankula was prosecuted because they disregarded his intent. They disregarded the reasonable man test. Humza Yousaf is a liar, and he is taking pleasure in taking away our rights, all because in the past he may have received some mean tweets. Today is a very, very dark day for Scotland. Our government is a joke. Everything about this is... I wish it was a joke, honestly. I wish it was a joke. I'm doing a disservice to how horrific this bill is by calling it a joke, honestly. This is blatant authoritarianism at its finest. I'm someone who, in recent years, has become more inclined to think, yes, I think Scotland should be an independent country. I used to be the other way, and I've slowly kind of moved over towards the independence view. However, I will not support the SNP or this party or any person who thinks it is okay to curtail our freedoms. I don't want to live in an independent Scotland when we're turning into this horrible authoritarian state. I would rather remain part of the UK and safeguard our freedoms. Because, my lord, this is terrifying. This is insane. This is just ripe to be abused. This entire law. I know this is more of a rant rather than maybe an informative video. I just wanted to sit down and talk about this because I think it's very important that people are aware of what's going on here. The Scottish government is horrifically authoritarian. To send people to prison for saying offensive things, for possessing offensive materials for 7 years is ridiculous. Humza Yousaf and the SNP should be ashamed of themselves. Every single person who voted for this bill should be ashamed of themselves. They have voted to take away the rights of 6 million people. They have taken away their human rights. That is what has happened here, folks. And you can argue all you want about, oh, well, it's stopping hate. Why do you need rights to be hateful? Why do you need rights? The fact is, rights have been taken away here. And this law can and will be abused. Scotland no longer has the right to free speech, no matter what Humza Yousaf would have you believe. He keeps saying, oh, we're protecting freedom of speech while also protecting those who face hate. No, you're not. You're not doing that at all. You are literally curtailing freedom of speech. You are taking away freedom of speech in favor of sparing feelings of some people. Absolutely ridiculous.